Welcome to the May monthly policy update. See people coming into the virtual conference hall. We're glad to have you this afternoon. If you're in Washington, D.C., you're sacrificing some spectacular weather to be with us today, so we're especially grateful for that. Again, glad to have you. Looking at a minute or two past the hour, so why don't we get going? Couple housekeeping notes, and we will dive right in. So again, let me welcome you to Independent Sector's May monthly policy update. I'm Ben Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations here at IS. If you're joining us for the first time on an Independent Sector webinar, welcome. Independent Sector is a national membership organization representing a diverse set of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people living in the United States thrive. As part of our webinar feature, your lines are muted. We'll pause periodically for questions. Please submit those through the Q&A function. General banter and comments are also welcome in the chat. This webinar is a benefit, usually a monthly benefit for Independent Sector members. If you're joining us today and you're not a member and you want to find out more about that, we hope you'll contact membership at independentsector.org to become part of this community. Before we dive in, I want to respectfully acknowledge I'm joining you today, as I noted, from Washington, D.C. It happens to be the ancestral home of the Piscataway people who are still in the area. They're working to reclaim their land and their traditional practices. Also, many of the places we inhabit in Washington were built by enslaved people. Wherever you are joining us from today, we're really glad to have you with us. So I'm joined today by Wes Coulomb and Jessica Cameron, our trusted partners at Washington Counsel Ernst & Young. I'm joined by Andres Chong-Qui Torres of the Department of Commerce, and by Independent Sector's own President and CEO, Dr. Akilah Watkins. So I'm going to turn it over to Akilah to welcome us and to welcome our guest. As I do that, I'll just say that we've been really excited since she started as President and CEO in January. Most recently, Akilah led the Center for Community Progress, which is America's nonprofit leader in turning vacant spaces into vibrant places. She's also worked with the Obama administration, NeighborWorks America, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and others. So let me turn it over to Dr. Akilah Watkins now. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ben, for that warm welcome. And for those of you I haven't met yet, hello. I've been at Independent Sector for a little more than 4 months now, and it has been inspiring to get to know some of you. I believe it's important for leaders to listen and learn first. And so far, I've had a chance to hear from more than 30 of Independent Sector's members about their work and how we can strengthen the entire nonprofit sector together. Policy and advocacy are such a key part of Independent Sector's DNA, and it's an area I've been working on for a very, very long time. In the past few months, I've spent some time on Capitol Hill and at the White House, and it's clear that our sector has a lot of work to do, but also a lot of willing partners. Before I introduce one of those fantastic partners, I'll just say again that it's great to be with you all today on this monthly policy update call, and I look forward to connecting with you all soon. Now, we are very excited to be joined today by Andres Chong-Qui Torres, Director of the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Commerce. In his work with Secretary Raimondo, he is responsible for creating a department that welcomes all organizations as partners in helping underserved communities, an issue near and dear to my heart. Before taking on this leadership role, Andreas worked for the State Department, the Treasury Department, the Obama campaign, among other organizations. As I'm sure Andreas will tell you, the Department of Commerce has an extremely diverse mission. This includes its Bureau of Economic Analysis, which produces some of the most important information about the US economy, including the gross domestic product, better known as GDP. Independent sector uses BEA data to produce our sector health reports, but we know that data would be much stronger if BEA could produce a more comprehensive account of the nonprofit sector's economic impact. Creating that so-called satellite account is no small undertaking, but we believe it's the right thing to do, and it's called for in the recent introduced Nonprofit Seat Act. Andreas and his team have been truly great partners in facilitating and advancing those conversations, so I want to start by thanking him. Andreas, thank you for your work and for joining us today.
Dr. Watkins, Ben, Manuel, the entire independent sector team, it is truly an honor to be here with you today. You guys have been incredible partners as well, and today is about celebrating that partnership and celebrating you and the incredible work that you do as community connectors. So this fantastic group would benefit from listening a little bit about what the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships is doing, our role in the administration, our role here at the Department of Commerce. So I advise the Secretary on economic growth and job creation as it pertains to our most vulnerable communities, as Dr. Watkins mentioned. And you know, one of the most important questions when I started this job that we started discussing with the Secretary is, how can we understand what the communities are really going through, right? Instead of guessing and assuming, I proposed to the Secretary going to the states, going to each community and assessing, identifying, and executing on what people actually need, right? And so the other question that came about is, why do we go to our nonprofit organizations and our faith-based organizations and our small businesses at the end of the conversation, when they should be brought in at the very beginning of the conversation, when we're honing down policies, when we're ironing out policies that pertain to billions of dollars? We're talking about monies and resources and trainings and technical assistance coming from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, from the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it is very important to first get a grasp of understanding what it means to set an objective, a mission, and a vision to uplift our communities from that perspective. And so once we were able to do that in deep conversations with our undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, the secretary herself, and the DepSec, they believe deeply, the entire commerce leadership, and I can tell you this from experience, I've never seen this level of intentionality to put equity at the center of the conversation and to bring folks that would have otherwise never heard about these opportunities. So it takes that level of intentionality. I'm impressed. And when have you heard, right, of an Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships working out of the Office of the Secretary with this level of amplification? So with that said, the goal is to be able to amplify all the resources from the Economic Development Administration, from the International Trade Administration, helping small businesses export once they're ready. And then when it comes to our nonprofits, in your particular case, making sure they're connected to the head honchos, right? Avoid the thousands of emails and be able to connect and understand what the Economic Development Administration is trying to do. For example, with our Tech Hubs initiative, just a NOFO that came out this week. I'm going to be talking to you about it later today and sending the information via Ben and his team so that you guys take advantage of opportunities like that. $10 billion over 5 years, for example, designed to drive regional technology and innovation. And so there are many opportunities like this that folks would never otherwise get to listen to. And so the DepSec even told me, if we need to handhold, let's handhold, right? Like, let's do this the right way. From the moment our nonprofits apply to these grants and opportunities, all the way to when they sign up for them and they're ready and empowered. And we're talking about small, mid, and large size nonprofits. So that is like a pretty top line overview of what we're trying to accomplish here. We build momentum through each one of these roundtables. We've grown to over 10 states right now across the United States. And now that we build momentum, we put together a summit in October 2022, and it was powerful, right? Engaging, educating, amplifying, getting people to connect with our bureau leaders in person, walking out of there with the right business cards from the right undersecretaries, the right bureau leaders, was very empowering as we seek to embed equity funds in every NOFO that we roll out, as we seek to listen to what you guys are going through underground, understanding what the true challenges, the pressing challenges are. And so that's exciting. That's really empowering. And then on top of this, another very important aspect of this work is making sure that my team peels the onion for you from the 50,000 employee department. It's huge. Commerce is huge. It's a data department. And I continue to learn more every day, making sure that you guys get to see the top grants and the top opportunities, and that you in turn can pass it on to our community members. And so there's a little bit of that work. And finally, in terms of what the office does, we're trying to build now momentum for a historic youth summit in September and a partnership summit just for you guys, our nonprofits, on June 21st, 2023. And so I'm making a call right now and an invitation to folks like yourselves who think that will benefit greatly from having your nonprofit leaders, community leaders coming to Commerce and talking to our bureau leaders and leadership and engaging in that meaningful way, so that you understand how to access those grants, how to access those resources for technical assistance and trainings in person here at Commerce. It's going to be on June 21st. And if you're interested, please reach out to Ben. We'll make sure you're RSVP'd and checked in and ready to go for June 21st here at the Department of Commerce, 1401 Constitution Avenue Northwest. And so for the Youth Summit, everything that I've told you, right? Like access to data and innovation, minority business development, economic development, and climate resilience work, as I think through these ecosystems, but for our youth, right? On September 2023, we're aiming to bring in NASA and 8 agencies across the United States government and all of our bureaus to be able to uplift our youth in this meaningful way. And I know that you guys, many of you work with our young people, so it'll be exciting to hear your recommendations of young people from 12 to 30 years old who would love to be part of this historic moment. And this is in partnership, of course, mainly with our Department of Labor, our Department of Education folks who have PhDs working day and night to understand how to uplift youth workforce development issues and many more issues. So we're very excited about that. And so let me give you an update, very brief update on the conversation that I've been having with Dr. Watkins, Ben, and his team on the importance of the independent sector, of the nonprofit sector, to understand itself, right? Someone very wise once told me that if you can't measure it, you don't treasure it, right? And once you don't measure something and you don't treasure something, it's just not part of what you're paying attention to. And that was something that gave rise to this conversation of how can we help our nonprofit sector understand itself much better. And we've had conversations with our Bureau of Economic Analysis about what that nonprofit satellite count would look like. And we've learned tons from previous experiences. I did my homework and had a great conversation with our chief economist at NOAA, Dr. Monica Grasso. And she was able to sort of walk me through best practices, right? And what needs to happen for this to be a successful effort. And so that fills me with encouragement. And I'm now more positive than ever that we can accomplish this. But it takes many, many workers. Many factors need to align. And one of the top things that Dr. Grasso said was, we need to really hone down the asks, right? Like what it is, like the top 5 things that we need to get out of this satellite count, the timeline that we're working with, the stakeholders and the partners who are pushing for it. We need to have a united front. And so that is just organizing 101. And I'm just very happy and humbled and honored to be just one, small piece of the puzzle in these efforts. And you can count on me to continue working toward that. So I think it's very, very important. The benefits to our civil society are going to be groundbreaking, right? So let me close up with a call to action. I don't know how much time we have. I think that it's important to amplify these historic investments in our communities. And it's important to let folks that will never get to sit at the table, much less at the center of the table, to let them know that this is for them, right? When I think of census data, open source data, it's meant for them. This is not a gift, right? When I think of helping our young African-American leaders, Latino leaders, AAPI leaders learn how to patent and trademark their inventions, I'm thinking of the potential there, right? Of how much more we can do. Right now, over 80%, 90% of applicants are white males, right? Which is incredible. But imagine the potential we have there for our minority businesses and communities and inventors. So it's just opportunities for us to keep pushing. Another opportunity that I see is with our climate resilience portfolio. We have $3 billion coming in from NOAA, incredible infrastructure, incredible data coming in to help us small businesses thrive and our nonprofits thrive. And so this is going to require a team effort. The secretary is very excited about engaging with independent sector and the nonprofit sector as a whole. And it is truly an honor to be here with you today. Would love to hear your comments, questions. I'm going to leave my email in the chat box so you can contact me. And I'm going to make sure that Ben sends to you both the invitation for the June 21st event, and that he also sends you the EDA Tech Hubs opportunity that I just mentioned, among many others that I would love for you to know about. So thank you, God bless you, and let's get started. Let's the conversation start.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Andres. We really appreciate it. And your partnership. So I will invite folks to put questions into the Q&A. And as we start that, let me just see, Andres. We look forward to sharing the information about those two things you noted. Can you say a few more words about the EDA opportunity in particular? Again, your agency has so many facets to it. People, I think, would really benefit from a little bit more info if you have anything you can know.
For sure. That's absolutely. So, and you have this right in writing in a few moments when we wrap up the call. So this is the EDA Tech Hubs phase 1 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And you're going to be able to find it at www.grants.gov. And you'll see the EDA opportunity there. The closing date is August 15th, 2023. The award amount is $500,000. That's the ceiling per organization. And so this Tech Hubs program is, again, a development initiative of $10 billion total over 5 years, designed to drive regional technology and innovation-centric growth by strengthening the region's capacity to manufacture, to commercialize, and to deploy critical technologies. And so this program will invest directly in regions with assets, resources, capacity, and potential to transform into a globally competitive innovation center in approximately 10 years, while catalyzing the creation of good jobs for the American people at work and workers at all skill levels, both equitably and inclusively. And so the application for this NOFO must be made by consortia. And there are guidelines for required membership for each consortium to include institutions of higher learning, including HBCU, tribal and minority serving institutions, economic development organizations, and organizations that promote development of underserved communities and local economic stability. So that's a little bit of a snapshot, right, of what this NOFO is going to be about. But as soon as you guys click on the link, you guys are going to get a bunch of information. And, you bring an excellent point, Ben. That is another advantage of this partnership that I want to bring to your attention. You can use me now as a resource if you need to connect, right, to our White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, my counterparts at ED, at HUD, at AmeriCorps, USAID, use this to your advantage. And so when we're thinking of resources, think of whole of government, not just commerce. When people come to these tables, they don't say, oh, what are commerce equities? People say, we need help with housing, right? We need help with X, Y, and Z. And so let's use this unique ecosystem as well as we're strategizing, right? How to push forward and meet those pressure points.
Thank you, Andres. We have a question submitted from Cynthia Schumann-Ottinger. And, Andres, you're welcome to take a look at the whole thing in there. Right, so a shared interest in getting an accurate measure of the nonprofit sector within the US economy. you mentioned your familiarity with Noah through Dr. Grasso. Can you provide us with any other practical, specific advice about how we might work together to get this in place going forward?
So the first answer, and again, this is top level. You guys know there are certain things I can't, talk about right now. There are some others that I'm happy to meet with you individually about to provide more detail. But top line is not taking no for an answer, right? Like when they said, oh, like most of the amplification and public engagement work that Commerce does not really, deal with BEA issues, Bureau of Economic Analysis issues. But lo and behold, by not taking no for an answer, when the first ever data for Puerto Rico GDP came out in Spanish, we were able to work with their public engagement team and benefit thousands of Puerto Ricans that had just left the island after the hurricane. And so that's what I mean by, working strategically on these things. And we're talking about displaced families, that encounter many, many challenges when they move to Central Florida. And so not taking no for an answer. In this case, they're going to meet many challenges in order to get even the conversation rolling. But we have already started the most important part, which is the White House. And I had a great conversation with a colleague who just left, and she's leaving someone else on this portfolio. They're aware of this issue and they care deeply about it. And now that Commerce is on it, we want to help you, right? We want to facilitate those conversations. And it started already with Ben and the team and our top economists from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, who are now asking us to come together with the specifics of what this satellite count needs to have, right? The specifics on the stakeholders that are interested, the kinds of things that we would like to know about ourselves in the nonprofit sector as we seek to benefit our civil society and strengthen our civil society and our businesses and all the issues that we care about, which are many, right? And so that's the first aspect of it. I am not the chief economist, so I don't want to get into too much detail. But what Dr. Grasso was saying is that with the marine blue economy, taking those steps of being very specific about what you want and saying that, in a very methodical way, through many meetings with the leadership from BEA is a great approach, because those guys are excellent and they're here to help us, right? Not to make things harder. It just takes a bunch of effort. Another thing that I wanted to point out is the whole of government effort, right? Continuing to put pressure and have those conversations, good uplifting conversations with folks in Congress, right? With folks in the nonprofit sector, in the private sector, as well as the Department of Commerce and the White House and other agencies. So let me pause right there. Again, remember, I can only give you top line thoughts at this moment.
Super helpful and clarifying, Andres. Thank you. We were speaking with some of the academics who are experts on those very issues this morning. So that work is certainly ongoing. Akilah had a question that she wanted to raise as well, Andres, if you have just a couple more minutes.
For sure.
Great, thanks.
Andreas, thank you so much again. You mentioned in your opening statement about the importance of diversity and equity. I would love to give you an opportunity to really amplify your commitment and passion to communities of color and why this opportunity is especially important to them, and how we as the nonprofit sector can help support your work in this initiative.
Thank you so much. That's a phenomenal question, Dr. Watkins. So instead of sharing platitudes, let's jump into examples, right? Like not many Sundays ago, we were able to gather 250 African-American leaders, mamas and papas, for the Black Churches for Digital Equity effort, for example. Many of you guys are familiar with that effort and you're helping so much from the nonprofit side. And I was able to see with these eyes, folks licking the envelope, right? And signing up for 75% reduced internet bills, 100% reduced internet bills, that's direct impact, right? That's the power of this partnerships that I'm talking about. And there were 250 in person at Martha's table. There were 10,000 joining online from across the country, New Orleans, Ohio, you name it, right? So it was amazing. In that same way, seeing people sign up for our census trainings and webinars for the tools that we need, I've seen businesses save millions of dollars because this is open source data to understand our demographics, to understand the economic makeup of each community. And folks just don't know what they don't know, right? And they don't know that commerce is mostly a data agency and also an agency that today is seeking to empower our most vulnerable communities. And so the stories from our African-American community roundtables with business leaders, Latino leaders, AANHPI leaders, and from all sorts of religions and beliefs, it's been incredibly uplifting and powerful. We're reaching places that we never have before. There's a story from the Gullah Geechee community in South Carolina being able to uplift the climate resilience work. And for the first time ever, they were able to, through this partnership, meet with the head honchos at NOAA and receive the help that they need, as opposed to getting stuck in the middle with emails and all sorts of things. So I think that's the beauty of this relationship. It's real, and we're bringing it to you for your benefit. So I'm very excited. I really hope that you guys can come on June 21st if you're around DC and be part of that important moment, so you can both tell us what's working and what's not working and help our leaders hone in their policies, and also to receive top-notch information and resources from the Department of Commerce.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly helpful.
Andres, if you have time for one last question.
Sure.
We have a question submitted in the chat from Katie. Is there any timing on the rollout of the count? And are you able to detail any more on the climate resilience opportunities that you mentioned? So
can I, again, top line, and then you guys will be able to see it in the follow-up email that Ben is going to send you guys. So top line, there's this incredible ocean exploration fiscal year funding opportunity where we're soliciting proposals from US-based institutions of higher education and nonprofits for ocean exploration-related projects under this following three themes: ocean exploration and discovery, technology, and maritime heritage. And so the closing date is going to be May 30, 2023. So it's quickly approaching in 5 days. And the fully developed proposals will be due on October 5th, 2023. You'll see the link from grants.gov as well. And there are many, many other proposals on heat maps and many webinars and many online tools that are going to help our communities from the NOAA side of things. And there's more from NTIA, and there's more from NIST, there's more from the Minority Business Development Agency, and there's another EDA challenge called the STEM Talent Challenge for innovation and entrepreneurship. We will be talking about that as well in that email. So
great. Again, Andres, I want to thank you and reiterate the invitation to join that summit on June 21st. Email me, benk@independentsector.org. Having interned in that building a million years ago, it's a beautiful building to get inside, even if you just want to take some pictures, and you might get some organization changing information and connections while you're there. Andres, any closing words, please?
Thank you so much, Ben. Just want to note that, space is limited, right? And so if by any chance you don't make it to this one, do not worry. We're going to meet you where you're at. We'll have those one-on-one meetings with you and make this information available. This is just a great opportunity to meet nonprofit leaders from across the United States, right? In this very cool space at Commerce. So just be mindful of that. And thank you for all the work that you do. Let's keep working together to uplift our communities. This is a special time. It's a historic moment, and we have to meet it. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. I want to turn now to Jessica Cameron with Washington Council, Ernst & Young. Jessica, there are minute by minute developments on Capitol
Yes.
Hill regarding the debt limit, which we're all closely watching. There's also a lot else happening on Capitol Hill and around DC of interest to the charitable sector. So what can you tell us about the latest and maybe greatest?
Thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate you for having me on here. So I'll talk about a few things today. The kind of main one I'll talk about is obviously the debt limit that's really taking up most of the bandwidth in the city right now, and expect that to continue over the next several days until potentially the debt limit could be reached. So I'll talk about that, as well as some recent legislation that we anticipate being released, as well as some current bills already released relating to the charitable sector. So debt limit, we are in kind of crunch mode right now, if you will. I always like to start out by saying that Congress is very similar to a college student at a university, if you have any of those in your family. Either your children or nephews and nieces, in that Congress likes to do things at the very last minute, whether that's for a college student, a very large paper. In the case of Congress, that can be raising the debt ceiling or getting to appropriations. In this case, we're going to talk about the fact that the debt limit, we recently found out last Monday that Secretary Yellen sent a letter to congressional leaders saying that the debt limit could be reached as soon as June 1st. Now, if you look at your calendar, it's May 25th, so we've got just a few more days until that happens. For some background to everyone, I think in Washington, I would include myself in this, that the debt limit may be reached a little bit later in the summer. So maybe in the August or September timeframe. That timeframe has now moved up. So since then, the White House, and House Republicans, there you go, have been meeting regularly to come to a deal. Over the last few days, those negotiations have somewhat soured, and so a deal hasn't really been reached yet. So over the weekend, you're going to continue to hear that both sides will continue to meet to figure out kind of where we can go from here. So let's just kind of step back for a second and ask, what do both sides want? So for the White House and for Democrats at large, they would really like a clean debt ceiling bill. And what I mean by that is that they just want a bill that passes both chambers of Congress, gets signed by the president, and the only thing it does is increase the debt ceiling. For Republicans, they recently have become into the majority in the House, and they'd like to do some spending changes, specifically on discretionary spending. Remember the last several years with the pandemic, we've had some pretty big spending packages. There was a pretty big tax package or, big initiative by President Biden with the Inflation Reduction Act. And they're a little concerned about kind of where discretionary spending levels are currently. And so at the end of April, House Republicans kind of put their marker out for what they would like to see happen. You can think of it as kind of their first offer in negotiations, if you will, called the Limit, Save, and Grow Act. And that would increase the debt ceiling, but it would also include some spending cuts, as well as roll back some of the initiatives in the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly on the green energy side of things. What they are talking about are a few different things on the spending side. So one is obviously spending caps, which I mentioned. They're looking at permitting reform, rescinding some of the unspent COVID funds, so looking at the CARES Act and other big pieces of legislation passed during the pandemic to see if there's any authorized spending that just didn't get used. And they're also looking at, specifically Speaker McCarthy has talked about instituting work requirements for certain entitlement programs. So that's kind of the landscape of what we're looking at. We're not necessarily talking about changes to Medicare or Social Security, even though we know entitlement programs are the larger kind of part of the federal budget. But certainly that's something that House Republicans are very concerned about and would like to have going forward. What we've heard and why negotiations have soured over the last few days is that the White House has offered, instead of spending reductions, a spending freeze, and House Republicans have not taken to that very well. They would like more of a reduction to maybe a previous fiscal year level. And so that's kind of where we are at the moment. where do we go from here? I guess that's kind of the big question. I don't have a good answer for anyone, unfortunately, but it's May 25th, and next week is June 1st. And so that's very much, concerning to a lot of folks in DC, but also a lot of folks around the country. I'll just kind of note for some background, a debt ceiling negotiation is, well, a government shutdown. So that would just look at kind of, House appropriations. An impasse there is very concerning, and we've had those in the past. Reaching the debt ceiling is much more significant, much more concerning for the U.S. economy and for U.S. individuals than, let's say, a government shutdown is. And so that's why there's all this kind of work around here. So stay tuned. I think that certainly over the next 72 hours, we're going to see some more movement on this. And I think it's something to keep in mind as we go forward. One thing I'll mention before I get to my next thing, and it'll relate to what I say next, is that because of this, a lot of the legislation and congressional movement that we usually see around this time, a lot of activities kind of stalled in the hopes of waiting for this to get resolved before other things can go back on congressional leaders' plate. So again, kind of another result of that. So I'll stop with
Jessica,
the debt ceiling. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, before you turn to other updates, I want to make sure people have a chance to ask questions while the financial fear is fresh in their minds. So please do drop questions in the Q&A or pop them in the chat. I wanted to ask you, right? So there's this sense among negotiations, like, Republicans have all this list of demands, and Democratic demands are, right, don't tank the economy. Right. That's like a very Democratic framing of the issue. One thing that strikes me, though, is that Democrats, if they want to pass any spending bills this year, they need an agreement from Republicans anyways on funding, right, on overall funding levels. So isn't that one thing that Biden and his team could claim is a win from any of these negotiations? Like, we were going to have to deal with this anyways, and now at least we'll get to top line numbers by May, which sometimes they're not at by May or early June. Is that like a fair reading? Is that too optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think, our office has thought a lot about this, about what an ultimate solution may look like, where both sides could claim a win. And so, unfortunately, I am not in the room negotiating. So, you would think that maybe if they did reach an agreement, maybe to go back to fiscal year 2021 numbers, or to some marker that they could then say, okay, this is where we're going to, we've made this agreement. It would maybe help things going forward. I think because of how sour the negotiations, at least from my read of kind of looking into the press, are going, I think both sides are kind of dug into their position right now. But I do think the one thing that's maybe helpful, although you could say kind of hurtful, is that we're really running out of time. And so I think the next couple of days are going to be very telling in terms of whether something gets done or not. The only thing I'll say on that too is that, I think from my readout of House Republicans, no one really wants, and I mean that very seriously, no one wants to hit the debt ceiling and not have an increase. But there's some concerns on that side that maybe there's some fiscal policies that we need to look at, just given where the last couple of years are. Even if the last couple of years on the spending side were needed, just because of where we were and where the economy was at that time.
Got it. Thank you. So we do have a question about the rescission of unspent funds, specifically as it relates to nonprofit access. Our sense, and I'd be interested if you have any more details on that piece of negotiations, Jessica. We have been watching this, and we've heard that the general sense is that most of the state and local relief funds that were passed in prior legislation, which is where nonprofits have been most successful, are generally going to be considered already obligated, and so that most of those state and local relief funds will be will be safe from rescission. But we can try to share out some more resources and links around that in the notes when we send it out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't have any kind of numbers with me at ready, but certainly when you look at kind of the spending that, the spending that was authorized during the last few years, I think we're talking about a pretty small amount relative to what that looked like in these negotiations. I'd also argue that that's kind of one piece of it. It's also kind of what the spending levels are going forward. So. Well, if there are no questions further on the debt ceiling, maybe wanted to kind of turn to some things a little more on the positive side. Just of note, currently we operate in divided government with Republicans, in control of the House and Democrats in control of the Senate. We do anticipate on the tax side that Ways and Means under Chairman Smith will release a economic package sometime next week. I caveat that though that obviously the debt ceiling kind of takes precedence, so that could change. What could be in that package? The last couple of months, Chairman Smith has made it a priority to do a number of field hearings all over the country. They've gone to West Virginia, Oklahoma, and a few other places, with the goal of focusing on working families as well as small businesses. And the idea is to kind of have a final project, if you will. This economic package is a kind of culmination of what they've learned on this field hearing tour. Most of these provisions that potentially could get in the bill are more on the business side, so an extension of interest expense limitation levels, business expensing, and R&D. However, there are some other pieces just to note. One is certainly we're hearing things potentially that could come in are an expansion of the Opportunity Zones program to rural areas. Chairman Smith comes from a more rural area of Missouri, and that's been a big focus of the committee. Also potentially could have some rollback of green energy incentives, something similar to what we've seen in the Limit Save Grow Act. I talked about that earlier as kind of this first marker for House Republicans. I should note that this bill is probably going to be important when it comes out, not because it has any likelihood of moving this Congress, but it does give a good marker of kind of where House Republicans are going to be. And kind of a time that or date that you should mark on your calendars is going to be the December 31st, 2025, or the end of 2025 is when a number of individual provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are going to expire. And so we expect there's going to be a large bill that will be either extend some of those provisions and maybe some or not, or all, or somewhere in between. And so that's an important kind of starting marker again that should be looked at. Finally, I'll note that I know Ben and Anna and others may talk about this more, but there's been some reintroductions of certain bills the charitable sector has been very focused on. One being the Charitable Act, just was reintroduced in the House and previously reintroduced in the Senate by Senator Langford. This is the bill that would allow non-itemizers to make charitable donations up to 1/3 of the standard deduction. So for example, individuals, that would be around $4,600. So an important kind of reintroduction for this Congress. And then finally, there's been a reintroduction of the seat at the table bill and with some new and old current previous co-sponsor as well as a new co-sponsor with Congresswoman Nancy Mace and Congresswoman Betty McCollum. This is the bill that would establish a White House office for nonprofits to make sure that they're seen and heard within the federal government, as well as a few other things like creating an interagency council to make sure that the nonprofit sector has a voice in kind of how that office operates. So a lot more to those bills, but just wanted to point out from the legislative side, there's been some reintroduction. So there's some great champions now on the Hill for those bills. And I didn't also want to end on the debt nibble note because that's just never going to be a great thing to do on a Thursday afternoon. But I'll stop there if anyone has any questions about the things I talked about or anything that's maybe on your minds related to DC and what we're doing here in Washington.
Thanks very much, Jessica. So we did have a question about the Charitable Act, which, as you noted, we're very excited was reintroduced again. Last week, right? So Blake Moore, Congressman Blake Moore, right? As long as we're recording in public, Congressman Blake Moore, Representative Danny Davis, Michelle Steele, and Chris Pappas. So that's right. That's a bipartisan pair, bipartisan quartet introduced that legislation, HR 3435, and IS and hundreds of other nonprofits were really pleased to endorse that. If you haven't sent your legislators a supportive note about that legislation, please use the IS Action Center or any other form of communication to tell them that bill is important to you. Independent sector's research from years ago indicates that proposal like that could generate $17 billion in additional charitable giving every year if it was made permanent, as well as millions more donors. Two things that are both really important to the future health of our sector. I want to see if people have other questions. Jessica also noted that the Nonprofit Seat Act was reintroduced with a new title, but virtually identical to legislation in the last Congress. And again, I would thank all of you who advocated for that introduction and who endorsed it. There were 450 nonprofits who had endorsed it as of introduction. That number has continued to grow. In addition to the structural pieces that Jessica mentioned, Akilah mentioned that bill also would direct the creation of a satellite account on the nonprofit sector in the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So lots to build upon there. Lots of other positive things in that legislation. And we will certainly share the opportunity again to endorse that bill when we share outlets. We have a question asking us to reshare the charitable giving economic modeling data. Holly, we would be happy to do that. We'll get that in the follow-up notes. That was research IS released in 2019. So it's the numbers are maybe a little old. The tax code, looks roughly similar, I would contend, to what it looked like at that point. It also included some other modeling of other policy proposals. So we look forward to sharing that. Dr. Akilah Watkins had a question as well.
Thank you, Ben. We're really excited that the Nonprofit Seat Act got reintroduced. And so really interested from you all as to, if you are in need of any materials, talking points, additional information for your constituents, for your boards, for your donors or funders about the SEAT Act, please let Ben know so we can absolutely share that information with you all. We're also interested if there are opportunities to amplify and spread the word about the current piece of legislation. We're very open to partnering with organizations around this. So just know that while independent sector is leading on this, we are in partnership with all of you around getting this piece of legislation eventually over the finish line, and would love any opportunity and any space for us to continue to talk about, amplify, and educate people on the importance of this legislation.
Thank you. The question about the satellite office, it's a satellite account, and it's a very insightful question. So the legislation would direct the Bureau of Economic Analysis to create such a satellite account. As you heard, there's a lot of interest within the Department of Commerce in this idea already. Getting federal agencies to do things. There are a wide range of ways to get those things done. So there's currently nothing stopping the Bureau of Economic Analysis from creating such a satellite account. So there's lots of ways we can work this. And yes, Monica is asking if we can include a link to the Action Center opportunity. With just a few clicks, you can email your legislators in support of the Charitable Act. So we'll certainly make sure that you all get that as well.
Yeah, and Ben, well, maybe I know you're kind of looking through the questions, but I wanted to just kind of emphasize what, y'all were talking about as far as the BLS data. When we've talked to members on the Hill or their staffs, that's always the thing that I think they find instantly the most egregious. Like, what do you mean you're talking about that the Department of Labor doesn't track this data? Why, they track it for all these other particular areas of the economy, but not for nonprofits. And so that's, I wouldn't say it's an easy sell, but it's definitely something that I think people instantly get, which has been a positive sign for us.
Agreed. Thanks, Jessica. People one further. Thank you for your comment, Holly. About the data. Sounds like Jessica and Holly are on the same page today. The only other update that I wanted to share, this is bill introduction month, apparently, on the monthly policy update. We mentioned last month that a volunteer mileage bill was poised to be introduced in the House of Representatives. So I did just want to follow up and report that the Volunteer Driver Tax Appreciation Act was introduced at the end of April, HR 3032. And this is a bill that would increase the current tax deduction, the current charitable mileage rate from 14 cents, where it is set in statute, to the business rate, which is allowed to change with inflation and other cost measures, which currently sits at 65.5 cents per mile. So there's a massive gap there that this legislation would fill, and IS and others strongly support it. So we're excited about that too. Annie Finch has a question about whether they're looking to break out subsectors. I believe this is about the satellite account, and I don't think we know yet what this account would look like. Andy, our member, our colleague and friend at the Association of Art Museum Directors is well aware that there are other satellite accounts that the Bureau of Economic Analysis releases on a regular basis. One of them is the Arts and Cultural Production satellite account, which does contain subcategories. So you can see specific arts and cultural organizations' economic presence. That's the one I'm most familiar with, but our sense is that it would be more, any satellite account will be more than just a single top line number. Whether that would be subsectors or broken out otherwise, I'm not sure. Absent any other questions or comments, I want to thank everyone today for the robust discussion. It's been a pleasure having you all with us this afternoon. I want to thank Jessica. I want to thank Akilah. I might have to rope her in as a permanent co-host on this program if she's not careful. I'm sure she might have some other stuff to do too. And we're really grateful to Andres and his team at the Department of Commerce for joining us. And most of all, we're grateful to you all for the work you do day in and day out. We look forward to staying in touch, and we'll see you next month if we don't see you before then. Thanks again.